God always keeps his word. It's impossible for God to lie. And we see he is now carrying out what he promised he would do centuries, in fact, thousands of years ago.
I've read certain scriptures. It seems to me that there were promises that are only being fulfilled now. For instance, one of them says that the people of Israel, in America you're saying is Israel,
Yes,
as well as the Jews are Israel, would actually control from the Euphrates all the way to Egypt.
mm-hmm.
America, allied with the state of Israel, which is very inflammatory for the Arab world, but America has put its boots down, and President Bush has been called the strong man of Baghdad, and there's the Euphrates right in the middle
Mm-hmm.
of where America's army is, that in fact these powers, all in these last days, now control, as it were, the very crescent of civilization, the Middle East. And these great prophecies seem to just go on in a very living way, as if a divine hand is making them, moving things around to happen.
Not only that, but the reestablishing of a Jewish nation after being, as it were, in captivity or disappeared for 2,520 years is also a very remarkable event. And that, of course, took place in 1948 with the War of Independence, that there has been a nation of Judah there also in the Middle East. But we have seen a time when God has fulfilled a lot of these promises. Now, as far as America being on the Euphrates River, President Bush said, of course, he wants to withdraw. We're not going to be there and own the land.
Right.
And during the time after Christ returns, that entire area will be the example nation for all the earth, known as simply as modern Israel. But the important thing I think we have to look at is what else is prophesied for our time. In other words, what's going to happen to us if we continue down our immoral path, continue down doing the things that we know are defying God and shaking our fist in his face.
Did you see anything on the horizon that would lead you to conclude that if America doesn't change fundamentally, it will fall? The American power will be cut off as we know it is in the 20th into the 21st century?
Well, the important thing to realize is that if we acknowledge that God was behind America becoming a great nation and the British Empire becoming a great empire, then we also have to acknowledge he can also be behind withdrawing that blessing, withdrawing that support, if we don't do what he wants us to. In Leviticus 26, a continuation, frankly, of the promises that still apply to us today, he says, if you despise my statute and your soul abhors my judgments, which we are doing now as national policy. We've kicked God out of the schools. We're supporting all sorts of perversions that are condemned in the scriptures. We have things like gay marriages, so to speak, other things that we know are an abomination in God's eyes. He says, this will I do to you. The first one is I'll appoint terror over you, which we've seen terrorist attacks on us, and Americans being afraid.
So this is a scripture about what will happen to Israelite nations. Now, is this for all time, so that it would apply to America today?
Oh, yes.
This particular scripture. So the first curse is terrorism?
Right, the first curse is terror. But down a little bit farther, it says, those who hate you shall reign over you. This is verse 17 of chapter 26. And you shall flee when no one pursues. And I've thought of this after watching our self-flagellation in the news over this prison scandal, that we are essentially fleeing, or we are almost, Americans are almost punishing themselves when no one's pursuing us. No one is saying you must punish yourself in public, but we are fleeing when no man pursues. The Americans are almost in direct fulfillment of this. And then in verse 19 it says, if you continue, I'll break the pride of your power. So we still have the power, but the pride in using it is something that God will take away from us, and our power will no longer be as effective as it should be.
Well, in a political year where America almost is a religious experience, goes to vote, and they take going to vote for a president very much as almost a religious experience, I would say, almost the most holy thing that Americans can do. It appears from an objective point of view is to select the president.
To about half the population.
Yeah, because half of them don't bother because they don't believe it makes any difference, or they don't have the time. But to those that get involved, they do think it's almost holy. It does seem as if the choices in people's minds really will determine the destiny of the country. So they take it very seriously. But more than choosing a president, what really are the issues from a spiritual standpoint?
We are not the first nation to face this, because Israel has faced it in the past. Our ancestors, the ancestors of America and Britain, faced this in the past. And in Jeremiah chapter 18, God addresses it very plainly. In verse 7, he says, "The instant I speak concerning a nation and concerning a kingdom, to pluck it up, to pull it down, and destroy it." So if God, he says, I'm going to destroy this nation. "If that nation against whom I've spoken turns from its evil, I will relent of the disaster that I thought to bring upon it. And the instant I speak concerning a nation and concerning a kingdom to build and to plant, if it does evil in my sight, so that it does not obey my voice, I will relent concerning the good with which I said I would benefit it." That is being fulfilled today in front of the entire world. This nation, or the nation of America and Britain, has turned almost completely against God on the surface. Now, a recent study I heard about, a very recent study of Americans, said that 1/3 of Americans now have no church interest whatsoever. 1/3 are very church interested. They attend almost every week, and they say, yes, they are very religious, have a very strong relationship with their church and their God. And then 1/3 are sort of nominally religious. They acknowledge there's a God, but don't do much about it. So we have this nation divided somewhat in thirds. And how does God look at that? Where he sees 1/3 of the people very defiant, believing perhaps in evolution, very anti-God. He sees 1/3 of people who are, at least on the surface, trying to obey him, trying to do what's right, trying to learn. And then 1/3 who are simply in the middle, confused and not doing much. We will see how he looks at it. Now, in ancient Sodom, God told Abraham that he would spare Sodom for even 10 righteous, which would have been the number of Lot and his immediate family.
Well, we're going to be dealing with Randy Stiver, asking him questions about America at the Crossroads from a spiritual standpoint. Thank you very much, Rex, for being on this edition of Tomorrow. We are going to be talking about another issue. Is America actually now captive to an internal conflict which is dividing the generations? We're going to be looking at that after you see an ad for this fascinating booklet. It's 48 pages, like in a magazine-style format, that deals with the subject that Rex Sexton just brought up, and that is that the Bible does speak about the United States. Call the 800 number, and you get a free copy of this. You will not be asked to join anything. It's all published in the interest of spiritual education for the general public globally. Or go online to tomorrowonline.org, and then you'll find the publication listed, and you can just simply click it, and it'll be sent to your home. And then you can actually watch this program and other fascinating programs of Tomorrow online as well.